Welcome aboard the USS Strange Trek, exploring strange, new worlds. The strange and unknown. I'm Duke Williams, joined as always by Liz. As always, because this is the first one, so you have no frame of reference for anything else.
Exactly.
Which is already strange, kind of like this intro. But you know what is strange? Very strange? Episodes of Star Trek, and that's what we're talking about. We've got a laundry list of them to go through. There's a lot of them. You could say Star Trek in general is strange.
It's a very strange show. I'm still relatively new to Star Trek as a whole, because I think I've only burned like halfway through season 1 of TOS. I've seen episodes here and there of TNG, and Deep Space Nine is my favorite, so I think I've seen that almost 3 times at this point. But
which is a good one to be through. But you're relatively unfamiliar with Voyager, I think.
Yeah, I think I've watched one episode. I think I watched an episode, and I saw Neelix, and I was like, I hate this. So I stopped watching.
You gotta give Neelix some credit. He grows on you, much like the fur on his feet. It'll grow on you. And you haven't seen any of Enterprise, right?
No. But I've heard Enterprise is good. I'm sure it houses some of its own weird episodes too.
Oh, trust me, there's plenty. So. Would you say, Liz, we should say you're a Star Trek ensign? You're a little green.
Yeah, and Ensign Liz.
Ensign Liz. Okay, well, I'm Lieutenant Commander Duke. Mostly because insubordination has prevented me from getting a promotion.
Understandable.
Voyager fans would say he's a lot like a Tom Paris, except I didn't get demoted to ensign. But I've seen all of it. I'm still working through Discovery. I don't think we're going to talk too much about Discovery on this one since it is such a new show.
I hope not.
Lower Decks, I have not seen any of Lower Decks yet. So that's going to be strange anyway because it's a cartoon, and I'm not sure how I feel about a cartoon yet because I've watched the animated series.
Ooh, I watched like an episode and I was actually falling asleep.
Well, it's great because they actually animated it with real melatonin. That's why everybody looks so stiff.
It makes sense now.
Yeah. That was in William Shatner's contract that it would be full of melatonin.
They just shovel it down their throat as they go into the recording booth, so they're just like,
it's Captain's log, sawing logs, that is. Anyway. So when you approached me, Liz, about this idea, Ensign Liz, I'm sorry, and we were trying to come up with episodes of, I think this was the first one that I suggested, which is season 3 of TOS, episode 22, I want to say.
Yes, 22.
So this is like 3 episodes away from the end of TOS, and season 3 of the original series is where I think most Star Trek fans would agree it kind of goes downhill. Season 3 is probably is the weakest.
I mean, if this is anything to go off of, this is wonderful. This is the most absolutely insane episode.
It is insane, and so the episode we're talking about is the Savage Curtain, where Abraham Lincoln gets on the Enterprise. And that's just the way you have to say it. If you were to say, "Oh yeah, you remember the Savage Curtain?" No one's going to remember that. They're going to be like,
Abraham Lincoln episode?
Oh yeah, Rock Abraham Lincoln. Oh, and Genghis Khan.
Yeah, Genghis Khan, throw him in there. Oh yeah, I don't think he spoke even once.
No,
I think the only one on the other side that spoke was the guy in red, who I can't remember his name.
Colonel Green, who was a genocidal commander of an early 21st century war, which I'm not entirely sure which of Star Trek's early 21st century wars he was referring to. because there was
But,
quite a few.
One of the other ones spoke. Oh, the Klingon.
The Kahless.
Yes.
Kahless the Unforgettable. I've got a lot to say about old Kahless, though. Don't you worry.
Yeah. So do I.
But, okay, so we've already said, the other side and all this stuff. Let's back up. Let's start with the beginning of this. Let's start with standard orbit of what the Enterprise is doing. Because like most episodes of TOS, it starts with them doing something really boring, like surveying a planet. Mm-hmm. And this planet they're surveying is all like molten lava. There's nothing there. And
but they're picking up life signs on the planet.
They weren't picking up any life signs at first.
Oh no, they're picking up power signals.
Yes, they were picking up power signals. But Starfleet was apparently, and this does not jive for me with what Starfleet is at all. Space legends said that people lived here, because Bones comes in, a good old Dr. McCoy, and he's like, Jim, you got to forget about the space legends that Starfleet's talking about. There ain't no people down there. It's molten rock, Jim. You'd be dead.
At one point, I have it written down. The first thing I wrote down was that he said poppycock in that scene, and I was just like, what?
That sounds like that word. That sounds like it sounds like DeForest Kelley reading this script. I'm sure. Abraham Lincoln.
I haven't heard that word in so long that it took me off guard. I was like, what?
It's kind of like if one of these characters one of these days is going to say pussy feathers, and you're going to be like, words people don't say anymore. Courtesy 19th century presidents coming to Star Trek.
And then, I mean, after that, it immediately jumps into it, because my very next note is, what in the fuck?
You took more detailed notes than I did, apparently.
Oh, I did. I took a bunch of notes on this.
Yeah. So they're taking scans of this planet, and Spock says, there's nothing down there. And then they do notice the power. There's a space legend, apparently. They're getting ready to leave when they hit red alert all of a sudden. And they decide, of course, not to move. They say it's a deep probe. I don't know if that meant like a deep space probe that it was flying by, or it was a deep scan of the ship.
I guess a deep scan of the ship.
I think it would make sense, because I think they would have said something about a probe flying by. Mm-hmm. But I think that's one of the few times where they say the ship got probed rather than probe being a noun. But then a fiery specter appears on the view screen. It's just so ridiculous, because you can tell immediately what it is. It's just the outline of Abraham Lincoln in a giant chair, like one of those kind of like he is at the memorial.
It's like the chair that the memorial's in.
Yeah, but he's a little shorter, so he's his arms are, I don't know, they're like almost neck high. I don't know, maybe like chest high. They're definitely up there. Not an ergonomic chair. You wouldn't buy this from, HK or people who make good chairs.
But you can spot the hat poking up.
Yeah, the hat. And that's the deadest giveaway. Because who wears a silk top hat in the 23rd century? And then I wrote down "Fire Abe Lincoln" because he looks like he's on fire, but he just shows up, and everybody just stares at him.
It's just this long scene of them just staring, and then
I think that's the teaser. I think he appears, and then everyone's like, and then commercial. Mm-hmm. Fades to black. That's the teaser of it. And
then it's the intro. And one thing I noticed, I want to point this out quick, because I was only halfway through season 1. The intro changed.
Yes.
To have the girl yodeling in the background, and I don't understand why they thought the yodeling was a good idea.
Yeah, but you know what? That is so iconically Star Trek, though, that I think it's weird when it's gone. Of course, it's not in any other series, but I can hear that. I can hear a note of that and go, oh, yeah, seasons 2 through 3. That's good stuff.
I had to point that out because it sounds so ridiculous, but I love it.
But it sounds very 60s space adventure.
Yeah.
I mean...
Absolutely.
It sounds oddly futuristic for some reason.
So the first things I have written down after this are just two simple questions. Do the actors realize how stupid this is? And is this disrespectful?
Oh, about Abe Lincoln?
Yes.
I guarantee most of season 3 was the actors kind of saying this is kind of crazy. I mean, you've got episodes like Spock's Brain, which is like ridiculous but kind of cool, and then you got ones like this. I mean, this is towards the end, so I think they knew they were canceled at this point.
Yeah, they just like they went.
I mean, because Star Trek didn't get famous until it was syndicated. Mm-hmm. So at this point, Star Trek was not making any money, and that's not to tangent off a tangent, but I mean, this is why like Leonard Nimoy fought so hard for the royalties for the cast, because re-airings and syndication, where Star Trek got famous, they didn't make a dime off of that for decades. I think something like that. Yeah, so that was his big thing, and it went into the movies and the contract negotiations for the TOS movies and stuff. I mean, he fought for their pay to hell and back, and you know, that's a whole thing on its own.
It's information I didn't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's crazy. But they didn't know, you know. I mean, if your show gets canceled after 3 seasons, do you think you're going to make 6 movies either?
Yeah, true. They made a ton of movies.
And the movies are fantastic. I think most people would say the movies are better than the series in terms of like continuity, of course. But I don't know. I love TOS, so which you'll learn during this how much I do. But yeah, so they're shocked about Lincoln, and of course he's like, he talks to Kirk directly. He knows their names, and Kirk immediately, I think he's a little suspicious, but he's also
totally infatuated.
I don't know if he infatuated might be a good word. I wasn't sure at first, but yeah, because he wants to bring him aboard, and he says full presidential honors. So
it's like he goes all in on this. It's like he sees Lincoln and he just gets like, it's like Captain Kirk as a kid is like reborn, and he's just like so giddy about it.
Right. So alien Lincoln that is riding his space chair says, in 12 and a half minutes you'll be over my position and I'll come aboard. And then he goes, if you still use minutes as a measurement of time, there he asks if they still do, and Kirk goes, we can convert to it.
It's like, what?
It's like, okay, they use minutes. Every time the warp core in the computer's like, warp core breach in 2 minutes or 30 seconds, it's like, we got to convert to it. How long's 30 seconds, Scotty? Oh, it's about a quarter of a Stardate's sister, so I don't know.
I didn't even pick up on that, but yeah, they use like minutes and seconds all the time.
So I know it's not what he does. but after they agree to pick him up, and Chekhov is like, he was right on it, sir. 12 minutes, we'll be over there. There's a cutaway or a wide shot of Kirk signing something for one of the yeomen, and I forget the yeoman's name, but it's like that big sheet of paper with the pen, you know, that like the stupid trapezoid clipboard. And to me, the first thought I had was, oh, that's Kirk doing the math to convert to minutes. Or convert from it or whatever. But maybe he was just being polite. To you know, the president's here, like, you still use minutes?
Yeah.
Shit, yeah, we do. I guess. Spock with
sure, of course. I liked, once they did decide to get into, you know, the full presidential attire, I don't know
the full dress uniform. So anytime it's like, you know, it's a Navy boat kind of thing. They got to dress up when the commander comes aboard. I love though that Scotty's like, full presidential honors. What are we gonna do? Bring these other dead people above?
I love the kilt.
Oh yeah.
I love the kilt, but it's so hard to take that man seriously when he's wearing the kilt.
Oh no, anytime I've encountered somebody in a kilt, it's yes sir. Yes sir. Very serious, because that man could kick my ass 9 ways to Sunday. I'm certain of it.
I also liked him yelling, "Are you daft, lad?"
That's Scotty for you.
Yeah, it was just some wonderful Scotty moments right there in this episode.
So they don't tell Lincoln they're going to beam him aboard. They say they'll pick him up, basically. So then they transport him, and very calmly, Lincoln will continue to say he's Lincoln. It's like, what happened to me? Oh, it was a matter-energy conversion, Mr. President. You get turned into blah, and then you got blah back. And he's like, oh, well, I'm still whole. And then, of course, Bones is like, well, he's a human. He's reading as a human. But before that, they said that they picked up a rock with 4 claws. And then all of a sudden, they was like, oh, I must have misread it. It's a human. Or something's is with it. All this kind of stuff. So they're still very suspicious of this. But then Spock plays...
Except for Kirk. Kirk is still all in.
He's all in, but I think he's all in because he's the captain and he's not going to express his doubts so openly from the front. I mean, Kirk, for all his fault, destroying timelines, destroying Prime Directive wasn't really a thing, all that other stuff. He was a diplomatist in a way that he would make a good spy more than anything. I mean, he's
yeah.
I don't think Kirk plays 4D chess necessarily, like like outwitting everybody, but he kind of does, maybe accidentally. I think part of that's because he surrounds himself with very smart people like Spock, but he in the next scene he goes, of course it's not Lincoln, but anyway. But they play a recording.
My favorite part.
and Spock, he tells Spock like full drums and the band and all that stuff. And Lincoln is more confused about the fact that there are no real musicians.
And I wrote down, I was like, how does this motherfucker float through space but doesn't know what recorded music is?
Right. Or couldn't just come aboard. I mean, I guess maybe it was his image in space. It wasn't necessarily him, because he said, you'll be over my position, which we didn't even talk about this. They said that there's a small change on the planet before they beam Lincoln aboard, where a small change, which the next cut of the camera is a huge swath of the continent is now Earth-like.
It's just a small change.
Yeah, but it's a small change. And then Spock's like, I think it was Spock, that's 1,000 square kilometers. Like, that's a small change?
I actually wrote that down too. I was like, that's supposed to be small? Like,
yeah, that's not right. But yeah, so Lincoln's like, where's all the band? And Kirk goes, well, it was taped music, sir. I'm thinking 23rd century. I know it was in the 60s, but they were using tape. But that's one thing. Star Trek TOS's technology doesn't jive super well with the rest of the franchise. Like the computer goes, fetching data. It's, it sounds like a 60s computer, whereas nothing else in the series is like that.
I love that aspect of it, though. It's so delightfully aged.
Yes, it is. I forgot why I wrote down Dickerson, the security officer, because we don't see this guy again, but he's the one who's like in charge of pointing a phaser at Lincoln just in case he's evil.
Yep.
And Lincoln's like, if those are weapons, I can't do a Lincoln. I don't know what the hell that was. If those are weapons, gentlemen, put them down. At my age, I'm not dangerous, which we learn is a fat lie.
Yeah, absolutely a lie. It's like in this scene, we really get to see like Abe close up.
Oh yeah, he's fantastic.
You get to see how horrible that makeup is, and it's
I didn't think it was that bad.
It looks so bad. It doesn't look like a person anymore.
Do you watch the HD version, like on Netflix or whatever?
Yes.
Or the CBS redo.
I watched
of it?
the one on Netflix.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought Lee Bergeri. I don't know how to say his last name. I don't know if he was like when he wasn't.
Like it looks so clumpy and like there's stuff going on there.
I don't know. Lincoln was just kind of clumpy in the face, like he's got that big mole on him. I don't know. Clumpy. I thought it looked good. I'm not a very good judge of stage makeup though. So my thing is it looked like Lincoln. Like
the guy they got like Lincoln.
The guy they got looked. I don't know how Lincoln acted because they don't have any HD recordings of him, but he looks the part well enough. Maybe any old white guy in a hat and a beard would look like Lincoln, or maybe he might look like, I don't know, Bob Evans or something. I don't know. Like I don't know. He sold it for me.
Those really close up shots are just not flattering.
I think that might be true in most of TOS, though, for sure. I can kind of see, because they do cake. You're right, they do cake the makeup on them, because they didn't know it wasn't ever going to look this good in the 60s. I mean, the fact that they could restore it this well was pretty incredible. I would have loved to have seen like a real TV broadcast this stuff, though, just to really know kind of how it looked. Because and I'll bitch about this the entire time we do this, the fact that we don't have Deep Space Nine in HD like this yet is criminal. I know they've been working on it or trying to raise money for it and stuff, or for the documentary they did something, but they did mostly one of the space battle scenes. I'm like, no, I want to see Garrick in full HD telling Dr. Bashir to eat it.
Every pore on Garrick's face.
I want to see every Cardassian neck trick thing going on there.
Anything to not talk about the next part, which was probably the most awkward part of this episode with Uhura. I was just like...
Okay. I wrote that down, but I wasn't sure if we should talk about it or not. But this is Martin Luther King was assassinated a year before this episode aired. About a year. This was in 1969, I want to say, and then he was assassinated in 1968. So I will just come right out and say it. Lincoln goes, "Oh, what a charming negress," and immediately goes, "Oh, I'm very sorry. In my century, that meant a term of property." And she, without missing a beat, she's like, "Well, we don't fear words now. Why would I take offense to that?"
Yeah.
And of course, Martin Luther King kept her on the show, I believe. I don't know if it's a rumor or if it's actually true. I think it's true. Because he was a fan of it, and he called her when she was thinking about leaving and convinced her to stay on the show. But I mean, it makes sense. Emancipation Proclamation. It's Abe Lincoln. You got to try to present that Earth has moved past these petty nonsense racial issues that should have never been a problem in the first place.
I do want to say, like, that's still one of the things I like the most about Star Trek.
Right.
Is its take on this incredible, and this is all Gene Roddenberry's like original vision, like this incredibly like open future, this accepting kind of future where
Kirk even says it. He's like, at this point in our lives, we're delighted with who we are, which I think is a little flawed. Like I think it's a little flawed though, because it should also be when we're delighted who everyone else is, because nobody's racist because they're not happy with who they are.
Yeah,
they're racist because they're assholes. I mean, but it's also such a small part of this episode. It's literally 30 seconds, if that. And Lincoln immediately knows he's wrong when he says it, and they move right past it. It's never brought up again, which I don't know. I'm kind of thinking like, okay, it's good that they said that. It was definitely probably very progressive for the time, which Star Trek was always kind of like that in some ways. Yeah. But it's one of those things, like I looked at it for a second watching it, and I forgot about that part, where it's like, oh, well, they really said that.
Yeah.
On Star Trek. Like you would never think, because look at going back to Deep Space Nine, one of the last season episodes of that, Bada Bing, Bada Bing, I think, or something like that. It's the casino episode where they've got to trick the casino hologram into letting Vic Fontaine do his thing again, and Captain Sisko does not want to participate because it's an image of the 60s. And he goes, black people weren't treated very well then. And of course, Cassidy Yates is like, well, that's the way it should be, not the way it was. And it's like, and it felt so good. But Deep Space Nine, I think, tackled that a lot better. They had a point with those episodes, I think, especially like Far Beyond the Stars and all that, which is another one I want to talk about.
There's just so many of these episodes to talk about.
Yeah. So they said that when they could have made Lincoln's character a lot more of the "I've fought for people who had nobody fighting for them again." I think that would have made the point a little better. Yeah.
Instead, he's just Abe Lincoln.
Yeah, and then he's like, I sent 100,000 men to their death, and I didn't like that. But never once bringing up what he did outside of the Civil War specifically.
Yeah.
But he's not the star of this episode, though. it's Kirk and Spock, because we learn in the next scene when Uhura's like, by the way, Scotty and Bones have been waiting for your ass for 2 hours in the conference room. So Uhura gives Lincoln a tour of the ship, and they go into the conference room where Bones and Scotty are not happy that that they are entertaining this charlatan, I think is something Bones says, like this fraud. You don't believe he's the real president? Oh, and then Kirk goes, oh, of course I don't believe he's the real president. He believes he is, though.
That was a good line.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I like that one.
But they're arguing about, apparently, Lincoln has invited them to beam back down to the planet with them, specifically Kirk and Spock. And Bones, of course, says no because it's molten lava down there, and do we just see that it's molten lava, or is it the computer telling us it's fake now or real now or whatever? And of course, Scotty is just being Scotty. He goes, no, Captain, you can't do it.
I can't pull you out in time.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's even one part I really liked where Kirk goes, Bones, you're real close to insubordination. He goes, is it insubordination to remind the captain that he might go in something that I can't patch him back together again? And I'm like, yeah, that's Bones for you right there. He's telling Kirk, you're going to die. And there ain't going to be nothing I can do about it. There ain't going to be no Romulan ale that's going to cauterize that wound for you. But of course,
they're getting... I wrote, like, Kirk is really just getting played like a fiddle here.
Yeah, because he said, he's like, well, he's a boyhood hero. Which I think there's a couple episodes where Kirk maybe mentions Lincoln, but it's no secret that he has an admiration for older American heroes, if you will. Because he's, what was he, born in Utah, I think? Kirk's a good old American boy. He was probably all-American on the football team. He was that kind of kid.
Good old American boy.
Yeah, good old, whole grown, eating corn and biscuits for breakfast. I don't know. But they say why Lincoln, and it was to titillate Kirk's curiosity because it's his personal hero, and he knew that if Lincoln was like, come on down to the planet, man, I got candy and I got blackjack and hookers or something, I don't know, Kirk's gonna be like, yeah, I'll go. And they do so, and Spock is like, well, I'm gonna go too because you're the captain and
I was invited.
Yeah, I'd be rude to turn it down.
So that's when they actually managed to make their way down there, and in the process of going down, their phasers and tricorder don't go with.
Right, which perplexes the hell out of Scotty and Bones because they're like, oh no. And of course we know as the viewer that that's no good, but it means there's another force at play. And of course when they get there, their communicator doesn't work, which they still have. It still let them transport with the communicator, but it doesn't work. So then the ship can't raise them, they can't raise the ship, and they're sitting there in a they say it's like a canyon on Earth, or a thing.
The set that we've seen 100 times before at this point.
This is the Star Trek TOS Rocky Woods set. I mean, sets were expensive, so it worked. And they're talking to Lincoln, and he still thinks he's Lincoln. He is not giving any indication of that. That's when the Rock talks.
That's when Sarek comes out first.
Yes. Okay. I had this written backwards. Sarek or Surak.
Either way, his outfit it's wonderful. I saw that and I died. I was like, oh my god.
So Surak is the father of the Vulcan lifestyle. He's and he's one of those characters you learn a lot about more in Enterprise. But he's a 4th century Vulcan and kind of the father of the Vulcan logic philosophy. Like I said, it's one of those things they explore a lot in Enterprise, which is really cool. When they talk about his original writings of the Kirshara and all these other things, he's the father of the logic.
And that's why he's here, is because it's essentially
He's Spock's hero.
Yeah, it's Spock's hero at this point.
Yeah, because even I think that's the first thing he says to Spock directly. When you turned to face me, your face betrayed what was in your heart, or something. Showed what was in your heart. Because I showed emotion, I begged forgiveness.
I'm sorry.
I displayed emotion, I beg forgiveness. But he treats him with kind of this discourtesy, because he says, even if I am an illusion, will you still not greet me? Because he's telling him, live long and prosper, and then Spock goes, live long and prosper, image of Surak. He ain't buying your shit for a second. But both these guys, the hero of Spock, the hero of Kirk, believe for all intents and purposes they are who they are. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing to really betray that. But that's
I don't understand how it works, but,
eventually,
it's there.
Eventually we do. Well, we kind of learned... They kind of tease it very subtly earlier when they mention the rocks, because then all of a sudden a rock starts to talk. And I don't know if you caught the rock's name, but it's Yarnek.
I didn't get that.
Yeah, well, this is one of those things that I think might have been in like the show Bible notes kind of thing. But that's, if you watch it with closed captioning like I do, it shows his name at one point as the speaker. But I can't remember if he actually introduces himself or not. But he is the ugliest creature, I think, in the franchise.
So the first thing I wrote about it was, why is it so thick?
And not with two C's. This is a CK situation. It looks like molten lava that ran into the litter box.
Yeah.
Like it's clumpy. Like you mentioned, Abe Lincoln looking clumpy. This is clump right here. But it's got these eyes, I'm calling them eyes. They're not there, but they're all over the head of it that light up when it talks. I mean, it's cool. It's got claws that click together when it wants to do something.
The little clicky claws.
Yeah.
They're adorable. He's just like...
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the only part that's adorable. It's the only part that's semi-nice about this thing is it's mince, little claws that could probably pierce you.
But they're so small and like useless looking, and all he does is just like click them together. And
he doesn't walk because that would have cost a lot of money to make it walk. So it just kind of... It was a normal rock, and that it transforms into this creature, and the creature then gives us all the exposition that we need. That this planet, Excalibian, something like that, Excalibin, obviously not Excalibur, but close. No. That he's brought them down here he's invited them. He's given them a great honor to perform on their stage, to teach them about humanity and the concept of good and evil. Mm-hmm. And Kirk's like, what do you mean stage? What do you mean? What do you mean?
What do you mean?
And that's when they think the name comes from, the Savage Curtain. It's the curtain rises on this sick play for Yarnek and his Excalibian friends. Thank God he's the only one we saw. They only had that much money.
Yeah.
But he even says that everyone on the planet is watching, so we know there's a lot of them. But the people on the Enterprise, which now has lost power and can't do it, they can't beam anything, they can't beam in their phasers, nothing, is watching this almost like it was like a pay-per-view program that you're watching at the bar or something. Like they're all huddled around the view screen, like, I got $5 on Spock.
It's like WWE Star Trek.
Yes, which is very true, because eventually Yarnek says that he wants them to. This play is to learn about alien philosophies, and their current contest is going to be to have the humans and Spock and Surak, so humanoids, fight against evil, and then all of a sudden he clicks his claws, and 4 people come out who are apparently evil, and one of them is Colonel Green, who Colonel Philip Green, who is this show mentions him as a genocidal 21st century basically war criminal, and he's a human. So it's an Earth thing. There's also Genghis Khan, which is an approximation of Genghis Khan, I think.
Yeah. So who is the lady, the Zora?
Zora of Tiburon, I think, is just we only hear about them like once again, and I think it's in Enterprise. A very brief mention of their species again. So I think it was just, here's a Beta Quadrant enemy that we may use later, and we need to establish the race of it that's not the Klingons, but still bad.
Yeah.
And then have them never show up again. There was a character that we encounter a couple episodes before this, The Way to Eden, which is also on the list I think we talked about. One of the characters is from that planet Zora's from, but I don't think we ever see the people of the planet. I don't think we ever visit Tiboran, or whatever it's called. So I think this might be the only time we see this race of aliens, species of alien, is Zora, who I think says like maybe 3 lines this whole episode anyway.
Yeah. So then the race that we see more often is that Klingon.
Yes, so we have Kahless the Unforgettable, who was the founder of the Klingon Empire. I don't think at this point that had been established in the canon.
The Klingon, I forgot how different they looked.
Oh, yes. There's a reason. There's always a reason. Star Trek has written its way out of everything.
But I forgot how different they look, and then I realized, like, I can't tell if that's makeup, but it kind of looks like it. I was just like, I don't know.
I have no authority to say this, so this is pure speculation. It's either blackface on a lot of the Klingons, or it's very poor makeup in general.
I think,
I don't know which of we know which one is worse. The blackface is absolutely worse, because the Klingons are, for all intents and purposes, the bad guys. The guy that played Kahless, I just looked it up on Memory Alpha, was in fact not a African American.
There we go.
So it's Star Trek did a lot of good things, and it dropped the ball incredibly on a lot more. Like, you couldn't have told me you couldn't have found a talented African American actor for a minor role, even late in production. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, for all I know, they didn't pay that guy. I hope they did, but who knows?
He did some acting. He did some fighting. So hopefully,
and that guy is in other episodes too. The guy that played Kahless. That's one thing about Kahless, but there's a lot we'll get into, I think, later on about Kahless specifically for me and why he looks that way. But why why Klingons look weird in this series.
I want to point out real quick that for this part, like when the other people came out, I wrote Super Smash Star Trek Edition. And then they started fighting, and I typed it again in all caps, Super Smash Star Trek Edition. Yeah,
it's everybody's here. And that's the whole point, right? Is the Excalibans want to put the philosophy of good and evil against each other, and in this play, in this stage, and it's you need to survive. And the rules are, there are no rules. You can fashion a weapon out of whatever you can find in your Earth-like environment. By the way, here's 2 aliens against you and your 2 aliens who are vaguely similar strength-wise.
I was going to say, aren't Vulcans, like, pretty damn strong?
Vulcans are very good martial artists. But they abhor violence, which is a whole thing Surak goes into soon.
Yes.
But they are very good martial artists. In Enterprise, there's a whole bit where T'Pol, the first officer, the Vulcan, teaches everybody Vulcan martial arts, and she absolutely destroys everybody. They're not going out trying to pick fights, which is Surak's whole thing. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so the Excalibian says, all right, you need to survive, which means you have to kill the evil ones. I want to see who's stronger, good or evil. Which is a flawed concept for the Vulcans, in my opinion, because they don't really believe in good and evil, especially Surak.
Yeah. Who's
logic and illogic. But they immediately basically all say, we're not going to participate in this. Kirk's like, we were refusing. We're not doing this shit.
My favorite part is when he refuses and he gets all angry, he goes up and he tries to punch it, because it's a very Kirk thing to do, and it just burns him, and he's like,
Does my body heat intimidate you, Earthman? Or something like that. Because the thing, Yarnak is a molten rock creature. Mm-hmm. And apparently the steam coming off of it did not give Kirk a clue that maybe don't touch it. So then, and I think they say that you can communicate with the vessel now because Kirk says we're not going to fight, and the guy says you need a cause, you need a reason to fight. The guy punches him. You need a reason to fight? I'll give you a reason to fight. Call your damn ship. So he calls up to the ship on his flip phone, and Scotty is ignoring Uhura being like, I've got the captain, because he's dealing with the fact that the engine's going to blow up in 4 hours.
Yeah, it's kind of bad.
Yeah, 4 hours. And so now they have a reason to fight. And then after, I think it was even after that, Colonel Green comes up and he's like, we don't have to fight. And then Kirk goes, you're well known for backstabbing in the middle of negotiations. Oh, well, that was history exaggerates. And then immediately Genghis Khan throws a rock on him. And Kahless comes out of nowhere. And then Abe Lincoln, who you may not know, common history nerds, but Abe Lincoln was something of a wrestler. And he fucks up Genghis Khan and Kahless. I mean, he throws them around. I mean, they retreat. The bad guys retreat from their little fist fight.
You can't go up against Kirk. Come on.
No, I mean, the Gorn almost had Kirk.
The Gorn was also a big lizard.
Yeah, that's a whole episode of just the 5 minutes of the Gorn fight.
Wonderful, wonderful
I
experience.
just want to be like Captain Sisko when they go to the triple episode. Like, of course I want to talk to him, Jadzia. I want to ask him about the Gorn. So that's what Captain Sisko wants to know about.
That's why Sisko's the best.
So they have their little tiff, and then it's a commercial break. And when they come back from commercial break, the worst part of this episode happens to me. It's Scotty doing his log. Supplemental log, Chief Engineer Scott reporting, we know the ship is going to blow up in 2 hours. So 2 hours have passed. And when they come back to the gang on the planet, the ship is toast. In 2 hours, the ship is gone. They've accepted that. There's nothing they can do. They've tried everything. They have just now decided to find a base. And they have no other plan because they do not want to fight.
It was funny just watching Kirk jump around on some rocks. He's like, it's defendable. And I was like, this is just a kid. Like,
and they never use the base because they never get attacked. They wind up going on the offensive. But that's when they have a debate, basically. Surak says, we need to be emissaries of peace. I'm willing to go. And Spock says that you need to let him go. Yada, yada, yada. Because Spock says he'll fight with Kirk. And they say that we have nothing to lose if Surak goes out and says, yo, let's be peaceful. And it's like, y'all just tried that.
I wrote down how useless Surak was throughout this entire episode, basically.
And it's unfortunate. And I think there's an explanation for that, and I think there's an explanation for Lincoln, too, and everybody else. That I think that'll be like that's my final note kind of thing. So they send Surak out, and they're going to, Lincoln and them say they're going to craft other things, because apparently ancient Vulcans knew how to make boomerangs or something like that, so which we never see. We never see the boomerangs Spock makes. But they start making spears. And they cut to the bad guys, we'll call them. They're having a plan, but they're not sure what they're going to do yet. Like, they're really bad guys. Like Colonel Green is definitely in charge, which I think is one flaw of it, because Kahless would have 100% never let this happen this way. He would have murdered them where they stood when he met them. But Surak comes out, and he has a little tete-a-tete. He's trying to negotiate. So
I noticed when it cut to Surak actually going out there, like, there was a drastic drop in quality for the camera, and it was so noticeable that I was just like, I had to write it down. I was just
There's another one coming up, too.
Yeah. And I wrote, one Vulcan gonna die tonight.
Yes.
That's all I put down.
one fake Vulcan. So they have a little debate about peace, and Colonel Green's like, I fight to gain, Vulcan.
What do I get from this?
Yeah, what do I get from this? I need something. Well, you only have the satisfaction that I did my best or something like that. Well, then immediately he's captured. And then they cut back to the camp where they hear, Help me, Spock!
Help me, Spock!
And Kirk gets riled up. He's like, we gotta do something, Spock. How can you just stand there? How can you just listen to this? And Spock's like, well, I'm not insensitive to a captain, but he's like, oh, you're willing to listen to him suffer. And
like,
Spock's like, Captain, fascinating. A Vulcan would not cry out so. And that's not good enough for Kirk. He still wants
Kirk
to go.
just does it anyway.
Yeah, he's going to, but then Lincoln, the voice of reason that he is, I mean, they should have given him a field commission at this rate, says that they need a plan, that Kirk and Spock should do something sufficiently violent to cover Lincoln sneaking around to the back to rescue Surak.
Immediately in my head, I was like, rip Mr. Lincoln. Like, he's not making it out of this.
Yep. And Lincoln works his way back there, and he spots Surak's body, and which I spoiled it. He finds his body. He's tied up, but he's trying to rescue him. He's saying, "Oh, don't worry, you know they do." And Kirk and Spock do a pretty good distraction at first, but when Kahless notices it's just Kirk and Spock attacking the front, him and Colonel Green, you know, Colonel Green sounds like the bad guy in Clue. You know, it's Colonel Mustard in Clue, but it's Mr. Green, but still, I think it's Colonel Green would have been perfect, at least in the movie. But they find Lincoln untying the guy, and as he's done untying him, his body falls back over, and Lincoln says... I
love that moment where after he falls over, and like you see the Klingon, and I forget who else is with him, but they're there watching, and then he just does the voice mimic, and he's like, help me! Yeah,
apparently Kahless is capable of mimicking Surak and Lincoln, which may be because they're all made out of the same rock bundle.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Able to fake it, but obviously Lincoln didn't know that, and Kahless is quite the trickster. So they've got him, but yeah, when Lincoln was proposing this plan, he was like, Kirk, you may know something about my history. I'm something of a backwoodsman, and I can do this. And the only way we see him do anything is he crawls on the dirt for like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
That's all he gets to do. And then immediately he's captured. And unfortunately, the next scene, we cut back to the base, Kirk and Spock, and they see Lincoln, and he's got his hands behind his back.
He's like, stay away.
Stay away, James. Because Lincoln don't call you Jim or Captain. It's James.
Yeah.
Surprised he didn't go full-on James Tiberius on him. But then he falls over, and he's got a big spear in his back, and he's dead.
Looks goofy as hell.
Yeah. And, you know, it looked like he was dead, though. Because he was. And we never see Lincoln again.
Yep.
That's it. We don't even see his body.
That leads to like the final fight where everyone just dies.
Yes, and it's an interesting fight. I mean, it's basically 4-on-2, and somehow Kirk and Spock are able to subdue Genghis Khan. They knock out Zora, you know, from The Legend of Zelda. Maybe that's where they got the name from. Anyway, and Kahless, they basically make the three of them run away, and then Colonel Green's gonna run, and Kirk dash action just pummels him, knocks him to the ground,
tackles him.
Yeah, and then congratulations. However, it would seem evil runs when forcibly confronted. If that's not a commentary, I don't know what is. But he does it. He says there can be no difference discerned from good and evil because you employed
the same methods and all that.
Yes, and evil fought for personal gain, and good only fought when it became necessary to save others. And you can't fathom the difference between that, apparently.
I don't.
But Kirk brings up that he says that you've rigged this, basically, that this cannot be a correct way to show you the human philosophy of good or evil. And that you can't have what right gave you to pit us in this kind of situation? And Yarnock says the same right that brought you here, the need to learn. Get off my planet.
I love that line, mostly because of Kirk's overacting. It's just like, what gives you the right to hand out life and death? And I was like, oh my God, it's and that classic Kirk.
I mean, he just saw for all intents and purposes, Lincoln was Lincoln. Because he says later, I felt I really met him. And he saw him die with a spear in his back. He didn't see him. He didn't get to tell him not to go see a movie that night or anything, or a play. But he sure as hell died in one still. with a spear in his back and everything.
I just love that overreacting is so good.
That's Kirk. Kirk don't take
No.
nothing laying down, standing up, sideways, backways, nothing. He doesn't take it at all.
And immediately after that, the Rock just turns back into a rock and fucks off. He's like, yeah, get off my planet.
Yeah, so they immediately beam back up. I was expecting, honestly, for them to have like a funeral for Lincoln and Surak. But basically, this is the wrap up. You know, everything's fine. Chekhov's like, the ship's fine, sir. Scotty's like, man, that's all yours, Captain. Can't explain it. Everything's fine. The breach ain't happening anymore. I think part of it was degrading. I think there was like something was dissolving in the
shielding.
engine room. Yeah, the shielding. That's it. So now Spock and Kirk get to reflect on that. And they say that, and this is where I have a problem with this whole episode. I now have a real problem with it.
Okay, all right, let's hear it.
Spock says that they were very good replicas because their minds were scanned and they were created out of their own thoughts. Now that works for one reason and not for another.
Okay.
The ship, the Enterprise, is equipped with memory banks, right? It has all of this because they send out information. They do the probe. Here's history for you. Here's a book to base your Chicago Society off of. Oh wait, that's a probe that they found, but still the same idea. They developed a very good approximation of Surak and Lincoln. Very, very good. I mean, if they were brought out of their minds, they were pretty damn good. And that might explain why Surak's so believable and Lincoln's so believable, but also not questioning too many things. Because Surak was in the 4th century. I mean, because the Vulcans are a very ancient people. Mm-hmm. So he would not have had the kind of technology. I mean, I guess he's never on the ship, though, anyway. He never questions the fact that these guys are suddenly here or anything like that. Yeah. Whereas Lincoln, I think, expresses a lot of doubt on this stuff. Lincoln is, they're both on their side, but Lincoln is damn sure on Kirk's side. Even though he's the reason they're there. He invites them down there. Mm. Which, does he say why he wanted to? He says, like, you can come down and visit me or something? Or see what it's like.
Yeah, I think it was just something like that, but it's not really.
Lincoln didn't know it was going to be a fucking contest. Mm-hmm. So here's where my problem comes in with it. Genghis Khan, sure, maybe Kirk and Spock don't know a lot about Genghis Khan. Kahless, they only know from legends. Same with Zora, I'm assuming. Kahless, of course, founder of the Klingon Empire, hero of Kronos, all that stuff. The reason, and the retconning reason, I think Kahless does not have the appearance he has later in the franchise, because we see Kahless a couple more times, is because he's based on their memories. But even still, because he's such an old figure and there's such a frosty relationship from the Federation and the Klingon Empire, that even if the planet had scanned the ship's computers, the information on Kahless would probably have been the same. But the fact that they know anything about Kahless in their minds at all is weird. Because he's never been brought up, I don't think, before.
See, I just assumed that the other people weren't necessarily from their memories, but other people that ended up on that planet. That's
okay. I did not think about that, but the guy did mention that other places had been there before. Mm-hmm. Other people, other races. So we had very different thoughts about the ending of this episode.
Mm-hmm. My first thought was, why is every entity in the universe just an asshole? It's all of these like super powerful entities that they come across in multiple Star Treks. They're just assholes.
Yeah, but it's mostly in TOS too.
Yeah, granted, it does happen a lot in TOS, but then you have
and they're usually based on some sort of like Greek god in TOS too.
You have like EQ, who is kind of an asshole, and he's a
lovable asshole.
He is a lovable asshole, but he's still an asshole.
Right.
But then I also just found it super weird, like, towards the end when they're just talking on the ship, like, Kirk gets, like, really smug about it, and he just seems really okay with everything that happened.
Yes.
And it just seemed very odd to me. And they kind of treat it like, oh, just another day. And I was like,
they should put out get in touch with Starfleet Command.
They should put, like, warnings out there for no one to ever go near the thick rock people planet ever again. Because it's a bad place.
Which is which is something I did expect them to do. I like put out a beacon, Mr. Chekhov, with a repeating message to stay away. You know, that would have been a very Starfleet thing to do.
Yeah.
And they didn't.
They just left.
Yeah. There's maybe there is some record to Starfleet Command, because they were trying to send them messages all episode about their failures, the ship failures, but yeah, they really could have put up a warning sign.
Don't come here.
Yeah, stay away. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here.
It was an episode. Just the whole time, it was just outrageous. It was goofy.
But you liked it.
Oh yeah, I'm all about this. Like early Star Trek cheesiness is just, it's beautiful, and this felt like the epitome of it.
It's definitely up there, for sure. I really like it. I really like TOS and how weird it can be sometimes. Like for the same reason, they were exploring an idea that hadn't been done with such success, and success being arguable considering it got canceled in its third season and didn't really get big until later.
Yeah.
But I'm sure as hell glad it did, because look at everything else we've gotten from Star Trek as a whole.
I've gotten Deep Space Nine, one of my favorite shows of all time.
And we'll have plenty of Deep Space Nine episodes to talk about, but I know we have a small list. Do we want to tease out maybe some of the other episodes we're thinking about talking about?
We can tease.
I know one of them I suggested was Phantasms from The Next Generation. Of course, the Lizard Baby episode of Voyager, which you're not very familiar with Voyager, so I would recommend watching a couple episodes of Voyager to get a feel for the characters before we dive too much into the weird Voyager stuff.
We had a Fistful of Datas,
which is a great episode where Data's takes over a holodeck program accidentally, and Worf gets to wear a cowboy hat.
Yeah,
it's also a good episode with
that
Worf's
one.
son, Alexander. We don't get to see Alexander very much.
There's some good DS9 ones. The baseball one is like, that's
Take
my
me
favorite.
out to the holosuite.
It's so good.
That ball was in the line.
Death to the opposition.
Season 7 DS9 has some interesting stuff. We mentioned earlier, Vic Fontaine, and every episode Vic Fontaine is in probably is a good one. But one I really want to talk, and it doesn't have to be next or anything, but I know another TOS one I really want to talk about is Cat's Paw. And I believe it's a second season one. And it is just out there weird, but it's like a medieval episode. Oh, it's the first season 2 episode, I think. But it's like there's like a black cat. There's witches. There's cursed specter ghosts on the planet. There's there's a part where Kirk and Dr. McCoy are chained up in a castle dungeon, and then there's a skeleton next to them. So it's like, Bones? Dr. McCoy? It's like, I don't know. It is super cheesy, but it's so good. And it's also Chekhov has a lot more hair in that episode, I think, because I think it's his first episode, and they haven't quite figured out what to do with Ensign Chekhov yet, and it's really funny.
It sounds like a good one. There's so many just really out there episodes of Star Trek.
Yeah, and there's, like I said, there's going to be some from Enterprise we can talk about. Unfortunately, Enterprise only was 4 seasons long, so this will be fun. So we got the easy one out of the way, I think. I think as weird as the Savage Curtain was, with giant alien Abe Lincoln showing up, and just how the audacity they have to just put Honest Abe in there, and not once call him Honest Abe in the entire episode.
Yeah.
Like, that would have been a great thing for Dr. McCoy to say. You think Honest Abe's not telling the truth, that he's not an alien, Jim? That thing would know honesty from a bite in the ass or something. Bones doesn't get to say a lot this episode. That makes me sad, because he's my favorite character.
He does get some good lines.
He does, but I always want more. That's our synopsis of the Savage Curtain. One strange trek, you could say.
Oh, you did it. You brought it full circle. You brought the name in there.
But that was the first strange trek, and Ensign Liz, what do you think? Are you still keen to serve under Starfleet command as we boldly go where no one should have ever gone before but did?
Absolutely. I was trying to remember what you were like Lieutenant
Commander Duke.
Lieutenant Commander Duke.
Because I'm insubordinate. I never got promoted to the full commander.
I'm ready. Ensign Liz is ready to look at more Star Trek.
More strange and weird Star Trek where the writers were
strange.
They were taking on they were drinking a little bit of that Romulan ale. It should be illegal. It is, Worf. It is illegal.
Thanks for watching this episode of Strange Trek. Strange Trek is part of the Night Valley family. You can find it at nightvalley.xyz. If you want more info on the podcast, updates, and more, follow us on Twitter @StrangeTrekPod. See you next time.